Well, if I may, I think innovation is the key factor. And the electrical vehicle provides both companies like Chevrolet, but states like California and our country, the opportunity to really create a new culture of environmental innovation so that we can be competitive, that we can align our environmental interests with our economic future. For those of you who are watching us online, I encourage you to send in your questions. We're going to start getting some questions from our audience here in Los Angeles. Before we do so, another question for you, Mark, because when we talk about innovation and the EV sector, batteries are key. And batteries are key to this whole question of whether the U.S. can lead. Where are we on battery reliability in your mind? What needs to be done so that we really have EVs that get beyond the factor of range anxiety? And also, are there safety or other issues that we need to be aware of?
First of all, I think battery reliability, I would say more durability. How long do they last?
Yeah.
Is there a battery that lasts the life of the car? That is a lot closer than I think we think. Actually, Edison, Southern California Edison and EPRI, at their EV Technical Center, we've been testing lithium-ion batteries for a long time, much before Chevrolet's announcement that they would build the Volt or any other plug-in vehicle. And we were probably about the only, I would say, public source of real battery data. And it turns out that we got extraordinary life, much greater than expected out of existing batteries. They also have an electric vehicle fleet, very large electric vehicle fleet, older battery technology. Everything far outstripped our initial expectations. So one thing that the battery industry has been good at is making advanced batteries that last longer than we think that they'll last. So that part has been good. In terms of alleviating range anxiety, you put a combustion engine on the vehicle, a plug-in hybrid or an extended range electric vehicle, and range anxiety is gone. And in fact, utilization goes up. So the Volt has a smaller battery than a pure electric vehicle, but it gets more fully used every day. So the efficiency of putting that battery on the vehicle, that's really the only way you're going to get around that. Public infrastructure will help, fast charging and other advanced technologies will help, but at the end of the day, I think cost will really prevent there from being a lot of, say, pure electric vehicles out there with, say, 300 miles of range. It's not likely to be common unless there's some sort of major breakthrough, primarily in cost. You can technically build one, but it will cost a lot. And so I think when you see the companies talk about pure electric vehicles, they have very modest designs, very modest range designs. And those vehicles are perfect for the people that know how to use them. If you have a 50-mile commute, you can drive your electric vehicle, or 40 miles. Most of us drive less than 40 miles a day. So if you have a second vehicle, it can easily be a pure electric vehicle. But you got to have a place to charge, you got to have more infrastructure, and you got to have a bigger battery. And range anxiety is not going to go away. So
I mean, one study I saw said, we're going to have to start thinking of vehicles in entirely new ways in terms of who we're selling to. The same way you wouldn't sell a bicycle to a family to transport itself, but for some people, a bicycle is a great way to get around if they're doing a short commute to work and they're comfortable riding a bike.
I think the important thing is to not pick one set of vehicle characteristics and try and impose them on every driver by way of external equipment or advanced technology. Is let the elite electric vehicle drivers buy those electric vehicles and let other people buy plug-in hybrids or extended range electric vehicles and build to suit.
Are there other comments on batteries before we go to questions? All right, let's start with any questions in the room. If not, I have a question from the online audience. This gentleman right here. You could just say your name, please.
Thank you. I'm Bob Tarlow. Particularly interested in anybody that wants to answer this. When do we get to the point where you can manufacture a battery that is light enough, cheap enough, lasts long enough, is compact enough to make a car without the price premium that this car has? Say, the price of a Chevy Malibu. Are we a long way away, or are we at the cusp of going over the hill of battery technology to achieve that?
Brent, do you want to take a step?
We're obviously, this next generation that we're talking about here, we're still in learning technology. To the group we're talking about, we understand electric, we know what it is. We've got to get through that learning curve, and that's the first, the new trial adopters. We are already making learned technologies from last year to this year, from last month to this month, from yesterday to today, just the drive sessions we're conducting here in LA. So it's like any new technology, you have to go through that path, and the cost will come down over time. And it's very difficult to predict the future. Nobody knows that, but I would say the direction is encouraging by all of us. The durability tests we're experiencing, we've got 250,000 real miles on this vehicle. So we understand what we're getting on it. We're going to utilize our OnStar technology with our first vehicles delivered to have live feedback for the vehicles. So it's important as we go to market and commercialize this that we continue to build the technology in the next generation. So it's a necessary step that we have to go through. And we'd never, I guess the industry hadn't planned to have a lithium-ion battery this size. We were making them smaller to fit in our BlackBerries. Now we've gone the opposite direction. So we have to figure out how to get the costs right over time. This will be very affordable for those vehicles, those consumers that are looking for this to meet their needs. The challenge is when we get to the next scale of high volume, and that's really the discussion we're talking about, meeting those needs of those consumers. Costs come down, infrastructure balance, incentives go in the right place for the consumers to make that change in their lifestyle needs. And that's what we're going to play out over the next 1 to 10 years.
Great. I'm going to go to an online question. This is a good technical question for some of the technical folks on our panel. And this questioner, Jay, asks, what are the obstacles to having electric vehicles feed excess power back into the grid at times of peak demand, thereby acting as distributed batteries for the grid and effectively transferring peak demand to off-peak charging at night? Does the electrical grid have the capacity to accept those kinds of inputs? And if not, are the technical obstacles easy to overcome? Do you want to take that?
Well, they're not easy. Do I have to go further?
This is essentially reverse metering, and
let's take this in maybe bite-sized pieces. Okay, so the first thing that if you want your electric vehicle or your plug-in hybrid or your EREV to be a distributed battery, the first thing is simple smart charging. In other words, let's time the charge to meet your needs as a driver, because that's the first role of the vehicle, is to drive. Okay, let's drive the vehicle first. Let's not create fancy backup power systems for our homes out of expensive vehicles. Let's drive the vehicle first, and then charge it in a way that meets your needs but also helps the system. So if you charge it off peak, utilities can, it reduces any impact of the distribution system. It tends to reduce costs. You can also do things like nighttime wind. You can take nighttime wind and you have an extra load that can accept that wind. Okay, so that's stage one. Stage two is that possibly if you could resolve, who's responsible for the vehicle, who warranties and repairs the vehicle when it's interacting with your electricity. Maybe it could support your house either as a backup energy source, or during the heat of the day and you drive home, if you have extra capacity in your battery, instead of buying it from your utility at very high prices, you could use your remaining battery energy and then buy it back late at night. And then maybe your utility would like that, because that would reduce the impact, and they would maybe incentivize you to do that. But it's mostly interacting with the home. And then the final thing, which is what I think this question is primarily about, is can we feed these things back into the grid and have all of this distributed power going back and forth and do all these really advanced things? And that, today, there would have to be some significant advancements made and significantly greater understanding of the technology. It can be done. It's a ways
off. The idea is if we have a truly smart grid, we can charge these vehicles at night, and then utilities could handle peak load and shave that peak load by tapping into, they would know where there are cars and there would be demand response for people.
And you can do most of that with the smart grid.
Yeah.
To put large amounts of power from vehicles back into the grid would have to be electrically configured to handle it. And in some places that might be very easy, and others it might be more difficult.